Hey guys, it's Professor Fernandez here, giving you a little bit of a mini lesson on your thesis. Thesis, are we there yet? Yes, we are. And in fact, you've almost kind of written a thesis actually. Um, you may recall that your ticket out last week was to say whether Adnan was innocent or guilty, and then 3 reasons why you thought that way. Well, essentially, what you've done is prepared an outline for a working thesis. So, haha, I tricked you into writing a thesis. Haha. So, what I want to do in this particular lesson is that I want to go through some of the assignment sheet with you, not all of it because this is not what the video is for. And then I want to run through a thesis for you. You kind of already know how to write this particular thesis because we did a paper very recently where you had to write a thesis for something. So I'm gonna run through a couple things. Well, first, you probably need to check this out because this, my friends, and let me make this a little bigger, is your assignment for the annotated bib and argumentative paper, which is the final two papers that you will write for this semester. So we are at the last two. And they're actually connected. And that's why the assignment sheet has them both in there. They're due on different dates, but if you do the annotated bib correctly, the argumentative paper goes very smoothly. So I want to show you a couple of things. This is, of course, obviously it's your assignment sheet. And this assignment is separated into two things. The annotated bibliography, which you will start writing next week. Actually, that's your next paper. And I'll go over that next week. And your argumentative paper. Now, I want to scroll down to this part of the argumentative paper. Your entire paper revolves around these two questions. Did Syed kill Lee? Why or why not? So I'm pointing this out so that way you start to focus your research more and start to focus your information more. I know it's really easy to say, no, I think this person did it and I think that person did it. And I'm going to ask you now to stop it. I know that I've kind of let you go through that. And so now it's time to reel it all in because look at what I'm asking here specifically. I'm not asking whether you think Jay was responsible, whether Dawn was responsible, whether Ronald Lee Moore was responsible. That is not what the question is. Do you think that Syed actually killed Heyman Lee? Why or why not? And this part right here, the why or why not part, is usually where students get in trouble because that's where they want to sneak in their conspiracy theories. This is not a paper about conspiracy theories. This is a paper about what you can prove and watching you prove it. So I wanted to go ahead and point that out that this is the central thought of your paper. You've seen these questions before. Actually, you've seen it a couple of weeks ago when we originally started talking about this. Um, and we started talking about this, and you did an activity on this. So I also wanted to point out that a lot of the activities that we've been doing thus far have led up to this. So right now you're probably stressing out. Oh my gosh, we have a research paper. Ah, well, yes, but you've been doing research all semester. So if you've been putting all your research on on your research log, you have your research. You kind of gave like the first draft of your thesis last week. So you have that, and I'll go through a couple of examples here. You are learning to do MLA this week, and you started actually 2 weeks ago learning MLA. We're actually perfecting it this week. Um, you're going to learn about summary and paraphrasing this week as well, and how not to plagiarize. So that's also coming up, and you're also learning that as well. So you're very well prepared to write this paper. You literally, all you have to do is execute. So let me go back and show you this thing. Remember this worksheet that we did, the research Q&A worksheet? And I told you you need to save this because you're going to use this again. So what you need to do before you do anything else, before we continue to talk and discuss the thesis, is that you need to pull this out again. And this actually made you save this in either your Google, in your folder for Google Docs, or in your folder for Microsoft. And by using all this and using this worksheet, it's going to help you um, kind of focus your research a little bit more. So if you remember doing this, I would take this out and I would actually answer these questions all over again because this helped you focus your research. Now this is going to help you focus your paper. And what's different from research and paper is that research, you were trying to find out things, you were still trying to discover things, you didn't quite know what you believed, what you didn't believe. In fact, you probably may not completely know yet, but you know more about the case now than you did at the beginning of the semester when we did this worksheet. So now that you know more, you know what the context of the research is. You know the interest in the research. Because this is a darn interesting case, right? Your interest is to find out whether he did it or not. You understand what the purpose of it is, who the audience is, and the audience hasn't changed. I'm your audience, right? Um, and if you succeed, your audience will know or believe what? What do you want your audience, who is me, what do you want me to know or believe? And you also want to write like how you're going to do that, right? If you're successful, this is what I will believe about your paper. So I want to go ahead and bring up a Word document here. And I've already done some pre-work here. So essentially what we're going to do here in this Word document is that I'm going to show how your answers to the ticket outs from last week can be turned into theses. Um, so this is going to be attached to a discussion post. The discussion post is not for a grade. However, that is when you will be able to get feedback on your working thesis. Okay? Um, and you're probably thinking, well, I'm gonna be fine. I'll get the thesis and whatnot and I'll make it work. And I'm not going to do that extra work. Okay. However, the week after next, when you're actually starting to put this thing together and you're looking at whatever you think your thesis is and it's not quite right, you're going to come to me for help. And I'm going to say, well, did you put your working thesis into the discussion post? So that way I can give you some feedback. And if you say no, I'm going to look at you funny. Um, because while your classmates who are around you already have a working thesis and are starting to put together a paper, you're behind. See how that works? So please go ahead and put your working thesis into the discussion post. I can give you feedback on it, and I'll actually keep it open so you can continue seeing the feedback on your posts. Okay, so let's talk about what a working thesis is. And you've probably heard of this about this. You probably haven't. A working thesis essentially it focuses your research and as a big transition between the research and the paper. So you've done this research, you've done research all through the entire semester. You should have a good 20 sources on your research log at this point. And that's a lot of sources. So you have this broad information, and you'll probably get some more sources this week. I think the librarian has some really good stuff she wants you to check out, or she has by the time you hear this, um, she had some really good sources for you to check out. And so um, you have all this information, and now you kind of have to synthesize what you believe and then focus your research. So it gives you a direction where to go. And also allows you to concentrate on a couple of things, not the entire pie. There's a lot of moving pieces in this case. There's enough moving pieces for everyone to take a piece, and there would still be something left over to talk about. So that's why you need to be able to have a working thesis. Um, that you can actually say, okay, I'm only going to talk about these things in this paper. I'm not going to talk about everything in the paper, because then your paper is not focused, it's not structurally sound, it's everywhere, and I can't read it. And again, going back to the goal of the paper, if you are successful, what do you want your audience to know? You want your audience to know that you can write a paper, right? So what's so really cool about a working thesis is that it's not set in stone. So it's very flexible here. So you want um, this flexible thesis, because you may find something as you are writing this thesis or writing this paper that you're thinking, you know what, I thought this was a good idea. I thought I could use this information to prove Adnan was innocent or guilty, but it's not working out. So then you go to something else. And so that helps you kind of change the thesis and change the direction a little bit. So your working thesis is super flexible. You're not married to it. It's not set in stone. Your thesis is a working thesis up to the point where you are actually put the last period on it, and you're putting it into your paper, and you've already done the outline, and you know how this is going to be structured. Okay? So um, so that's what a working thesis is. So let's talk about a thesis for an argumentative paper. It's very similar to the compare and contrast essay thesis. And we talked about the thesis having like three things. It tells you who the winner is. It concedes a little bit, and then it tells you why something won. And it gives you three reasons. It's very, very similar to the compare and contrast essay thesis, which is again why I was very adamant that you do the thesis a certain way. So that way we can make sure that the thesis was correct, right? So let's get to writing, which is why I have my little pen here. And let's look at this example of a thesis. This is the exact example of a thesis that's in your book. It's on page 16. It's very, very early in your book. So it says the Federal Communications Commission should re-exert its authority over violence on television because American children who watch violent shows are becoming desensitized to the consequences of cruel behavior. This is a very good, solid thesis. Um, it is a good, solid thesis for a paper about violence in TV shows. Um, my only note is that it doesn't really show you the structure, and I'm going to show you, based on your examples that you gave in your ticket out, how to reformulate this. But this is a good example for us to talk about the different parts of a thesis here. This is called an argumentative thesis, which is what you will be writing for your argumentative paper. Um, and I want to show you here, and I'm going to see if I could do this correctly. So this part that I'm highlighting here in yellow, this part is called the assertion. And let me go ahead and write this here. The assertion part is essentially the part that is like arguable. It's the part that literally says, this is what I believe. This is what should happen. This needs to happen. It is not wishy-washy at all. So there's no things should probably happen, or maybe this would be a good idea. Those words like probably and maybe, and sometimes the word should, not in this case, but sometimes the word should, are very there's always like a caveat. They're not very strong words. Maybe you should wash the dishes versus you should wash the dishes. Assertions are commands essentially. So think of those as commands. If once you take 1302, and especially if you take it with me next semester, this is going to be a very good lesson to learn, because this is the type of thesis that I want for your essays in 1302. It's called a claim. Um, and if we're going 8 elements of argument. So the assertion essentially is the claim. Now, this second part here, and let me use a different color to highlight. Everybody uses pink. I'll use this yellow because it's pretty and very bright. So this part, this is called the backing. So this actually backs your assertion. This is your evidence for your thesis. So you are claiming that the Federal Communications Commission should do this, and this is why they should do it, right? So you have the assertion and the backing. Two parts. It's all one sentence, by the way. Don't do 10 million parts of a sentence. I know that sometimes you can do a compare and contrast essay in two pieces, and sometimes that's fine. But for this particular essay, you want this to be one piece. You want this to be one sentence. You want it to have an assertion, which essentially is a claim. It's assertive. And it is arguable. And then you also want a backing, which is evidence. The reason why. Now, for this particular assignment, you're going to want 3 items for your backing, right? 3 reasons why. So now do you understand how I kind of on the slick made you do a thesis and you didn't even know? Well, let's look at a couple of examples. I've actually pulled a couple of examples here, and I want to talk about them. So if you see your example, I just pulled some random ones. So I don't know who I pulled, and I don't know which class I pulled. So if you see your example here, congratulations, I'm doing some of the work for you. Um, all of the examples here are about Adnan being innocent. You can do the same thing if you believe that he is guilty. I only chose innocent because an overwhelming number of you believe that Adnan is innocent. So I went ahead and went down that road. So here we have, I believe Adnan is innocent because when I thought back on my high school days, I was unable to remember any detail. So I'm going to go ahead and use some highlighting here. There is no real evidence to convict him other than he cannot defend himself. Use another highlighter here. With the new information they gave in the podcast, I think that maybe Jay and Jen are seeing each other. Okay, that's right. Let's do the yellow here. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3 pieces of evidence here, and we have what we are calling here an assertion. So see how you kind of almost already written one of these bad boys, right? So we have the assertion and we have 3 backings here. So now what we have to do here is finesse the backing and finesse everything. We know that this paper has to be written in 3rd person. So definitely no I's. So we got to take all that out. We also know that the backing is a little wordy, right? So we've got to, declutter. You remember that? There's a reason why I made you read the declutter chapter, right? We have to declutter it. There's also a little bit of conspiracy theory. And conspiracy theory is a no-no, right? So we're going to work on this a little bit. Okay, so let's take this apart here and go, when I thought back on my high school days, I was unable to remember every detail. On here. They can call me back later. um, um, what does this mean? So this doesn't really give us any reason. So maybe this person's talking about, he or she is talking about memory and what memory is, and maybe the memory of the people in the podcast or the case. And really, we're talking about the case, not the podcast. The podcast we're actually using as a source of information, right? We're using that as a source of information plus articles that we're finding. We've looked up things about memory. We looked up things about lying and behavior. So it's actually a source. So it's not about the podcast. It's about the case, right? So we are really looking at the memory of the case. So maybe they did some interesting research on memory, and maybe they found something like memory is not reliable, maybe? Okay, so let's look at number 3 here. There's no real evidence to convict him other than he cannot defend himself. All right, again, not really specific enough. Somebody who can't defend themselves really isn't a reason why. So maybe the fact that the evidence is circumstantial. Substantial, I can't spell, but hopefully Word will spell this for me. Yes, good, thank you. So evidence is circumstantial, or there's not enough evidence to convict without a shadow of a doubt, right? There could be other reasons as well. And that speaks more to um, more to, I believe, what the person is trying to say, rather than there's no evidence to convict him, other than he can't defend himself. Um, Maybe evidence doesn't add up, right? See, so we're taking out the clutter here, and we're making this understandable to people. And so here we have this third one here. With the new information they gave in the podcast, I think that maybe Jay and Jan were seeing each other. This right here is a conspiracy theory. You don't know this for sure unless you have done some research and somehow have uncovered this little detail that no one else has. So this needs to be rewritten completely, because there's no way to attach that. We have to, when you're doing the evidence here, you've got to attach the evidence to something you can prove, right? So if they can say Jay's testimony is inconsistent, that makes sense. So better than just this wonderful conspiracy theory. So let's go ahead and try to string some of this together here. Okay, what's wonderful about this is that I can put all this stuff together. Let's go ahead and cut all this, and let's put this in order, and we'll go ahead and make this happen. Okay, so we have right here, that looks like Adnan is innocent, looks like an assertion here. Adnan, and we'll use his full name, because when you write it out, you want to use his full name, right? Unless you use his name earlier in your paragraph, you're going to use his first and last name. So Adnan Syed is innocent because memory is not reliable. The evidence in the case is circumstantial, and Jay's testimony is inconsistent. That, my friends, is a very solid thesis. It has your assertion here, and here it has your backing. We're making this assertion because memory is not reliable. The evidence in the case is circumstantial, and Jay's testimony is inconsistent. So that's a really great working thesis. This is something that I think would be really workable, because when you're going through and you're looking at maybe your research log, or you're looking at more evidence or more articles that you want to look at, you are wanting information about memory and memory not being reliable. You're wanting evidence, circumstantial evidence. So you may want to define what circumstantial evidence is, right? That's a strategy you can use. And you can talk about Jay's testimony being inconsistent. This especially works if, say, you did the compare and contrast essay, where you looked at Jay's testimony I didn't make you do that just for fun, let me tell you. If you did the Jace testimony compare and contrast essay, this part is going to be really easy to write because you practically already wrote it, right? So let's look at another example here. And this is somebody else's. I don't know whether, and let me make you happy and spell that correctly for you. You're welcome. Okay, so I don't know whether or not Adnan is innocent. I do not think he was given a fair chance at his trial. I believe that there are still tons of information that has not been uncovered. Okay, so this is a good starting off point to talk about your thesis. So obviously this person thinks Adnan Syed is innocent, or he doesn't know it's they're innocent or not. And let me put this here and talk about this in a minute. So I said innocent because um, if you're using this as a reason why you think he's innocent, the then that means that you have no idea, and and if you have no idea, usually they're innocent. Guilty is usually beyond a shadow of a doubt that they committed a crime. If you have any doubt, then you've got to plead innocent, or you've got to not plead, but you've got to mark not guilty. So essentially, that's how I got innocent. Now, whoever did this, if you think they're guilty, then do the opposite of what I'm doing. Okay? So we have here again our assertion here. So there's a couple problems here. It's a little problematic here because I don't know whether or not Adnan is innocent. It's not a reason why you think he is innocent or guilty. So we actually need a for real reason. You know, maybe it's the cell towers doesn't add up. Um, or it's the testimony doesn't add up. Or the timeline, the police's timeline doesn't make sense. Right? Or maybe it does, depending on if you're thinking he's guilty. So we need a for real reason. We can't just say, I don't know whether or not Adnan is innocent. Like at this point, you have to make a decision. You have now crossed the point of no return. So maybe a week ago you can say, oh, I really don't know. But now, since we only have two papers left, you have to make a decision. And again, like I said before, it's about what you can prove. All right. So I don't think he was given a fair chance at his trial, is this person's next reasoning. So yeah, I think that's interesting. Doesn't mean he's innocent, doesn't mean he's not innocent. I don't know. We're looking at facts and you're looking at the trial. So, and whether the trial was done correctly or not does not constitute innocence or guilt. So we need to look at details of the case, right? Yes, you can get information from the trial, and or maybe like get the court papers from when he was petitioning to have a new trial. You can get information from that, but it's the actual details from that information, not the actual trial. So that needs to be expanded. And then I see here, I believe there's still tons of information that has not been uncovered. Yes, there is, and that's what your job is. So, what information? What information specifically? We want specifics here, right? So for this person, what I would say is work on this a little bit because these are way too general. You are now getting to the point where you need to be specific. What is it about this that's working, that's not working for you? If in specifically for people who haven't decided whether they're going to go for innocent or guilty, what I would suggest is that you um, make a pro con list essentially. Remember how we did the Whataburger versus McDonald's list on the board, right? The compare and contrast. You can do a similar thing. You know, you can do a for and against, which is really cool. For and then against, and why you believe he's innocent, why you believe he's guilty, right? And then you pick which one from there. Again, it's what you can prove. Let's do one more. I know I've been doing this for a long time. I I want to make sure you get what you need. I do not believe the motive was enough for him to kill her. I also do not believe Jay's story enough to say Adnan did it because the story seemed way too nonchalant that this dead girl was in the trunk. I also believe that they wouldn't have been able to find stronger evidence. Okay, so there's cool things here. So this is another Adnan is innocent one, right? So Adnan Syed is innocent because. All right, so let's work on this one by one. This one's actually really good. Can work on this. All right. I do not believe the motive was enough for him to kill her. Really, what you're saying, the motive doesn't make sense. And you want to be specific. And so you want to say the state's motive doesn't make sense. Why are we saying states? We're saying states because um, it was the state of Maryland that tried Adnan, and they had to prove that he was guilty, right? So it's the state's motive doesn't make sense. Let's see. The second one here. I also do not believe Jay's story enough to say Adnan did it because the story seemed way too nonchalant that this dead girl was in the trunk. Okay. Ooh, that wordiness. All that clutter. Let's declutter this. It's essentially saying Jay's a liar. Jay lied. Or Jay is lying about about uh Jay's body. Or Jay's story is has too many unexplainable facts. Ah, and unexplainable items, I should say. I wouldn't say facts, because facts can be explained, right? Or unexplainable things or situations. Whatever words work, right? And that's the thing with decluttering, is that you want to choose the right words. So that's cool. Let's see here. I also believe that they would have been able to find stronger evidence. What do you mean by this person? They, as in the police, the prosecutor, who? So the note I have here is, who do you mean? Right? So I'm just gonna take a stab and say there wasn't enough evidence to convict him. All right. I think that's what you mean. And so I'm going to go back to the note that I had to the one previously. You're talking about the trial. You need to talk about the facts. So um, the evidence didn't make sense, right? So that's how you switch it. And it's really, when I say this talks about the trial, the word convict talks about trial. So you want to talk about evidence and you just say evidence. And really, this is like a very fine line. And this is what I mean about decluttering and choosing your words wisely. Where this, I would give the note of, okay, you're talking about the trial. You need to talk about the evidence that was used. This one just talks about the evidence and not the trial. See the difference? It's very, 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 very slight, but it's there. Okay, so here, let me use colors this time. So here we have Adnan is innocent because the state's motive didn't make sense. Jay has too many inexplicable situations. And the evidence doesn't make sense. 1, 2, 3. Those are your backings, and here's your assertion. And there you have a working thesis. Now, with this particular thesis, it's really general enough, and it's a little too general, but I think as this person continues to do research and starts putting it together and starts outlining their paper, I think what's going to happen in this scenario is that this person's going to change around their thesis and make it a little bit more specific. Like, the evidence doesn't make sense. Specifically, what evidence? If they're talking about the cell tower evidence, or if they're talking about the timeline, or if they're talking about Jay's testimony or Asia McLean's testimony, um, then that makes it a lot easier to talk about rather than just the evidence doesn't make sense. Well, there's lots of evidence in this case, right? The state's motive doesn't make sense. So the state's motive is that that Adnan killed Hay because um, of being slighted, and it was a religious thing, and it was like his pride was wounded, and so he decided to kill her, right? So that's what the state is saying is the motive for this. So this could even be more specific, that um, using religion as a motive doesn't make sense in this case, right? And so that tells me that you've done maybe some research on Muslims and the Muslim religion, and how this doesn't go with the Muslim killing, doesn't go with the Muslim religion, blah blah blah. So see how that works? These could be just a little bit more focused, but I don't think that focus is going to come until the person looks at their research, see what they actually have, what they still need to find out, and it just keeps getting a little bit more specific. That's what I mean about a working thesis. You're continuing to work on it. So this thesis is definitely going to change. Okay, so this is a really long video, but hopefully I have given you enough information to start looking at your 3 reasons that you think Adnan is innocent or guilty, and start kind of whittling it down to a working thesis. And from the working thesis, that thesis completely changes here, um, or can completely change, and become more specific and more streamlined. It will declutter, it will simplify, and then you will have an actual thesis where you will start outlining what this paper is going to look like. See, I told you you've learned everything you need to know to do this paper. We've been doing it the entire semester. So you're very well prepared to do this, do this essay. So I'm very excited. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm here to help, and of course, there's always the writing lab that could also help you as well. Hope this helped, guys. Bye.